She is lying to you. She is not who you think she is.
The ballroom went silent the moment my sister stood up and pointed her finger at me. "She's lying to you, Your Grace," she shouted. "She's not who you think she is." Every candle in that room seemed to flicker at once. 300 guests turned to stare. My wine glass trembled in my hand. But the Duke of Ashbourne didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes on me calm, unshaken, like my sister hadn't spoken at all. "Continue," he said softly. "Ginevra." My sister's face went pale. She had come to destroy my engagement in front of everyone who mattered. So why wasn't it working? What did the Duke already know that even I didn't? If you want to find out exactly what happened next, hit that subscribe button right now. My name is Ginevra Ashworth, and 3 months ago, I never could have imagined standing in that ballroom at all. I grew up the quiet daughter, the one who curtsied correctly, who never spoke out of turn, who learned to disappear into the corners of rooms, while my younger sister Marigold learned to command them. Our father always said Marigold had the fire, and I had the sense, as if those were the only 2 qualities a woman could be allowed to keep. I never minded it, not really. Sense had kept our family steady for years, especially after father's debts began to pile higher than anyone dared admit aloud. We lived on the edge of respectability, in a house that still looked grand from the street, but creaked with emptiness behind its doors. The portraits stayed on the walls, because selling them would have told the whole county we were drowning. I learned to smile at dinners where the food was thinner than the year before, to laugh at jokes from men who looked at our home like they were already pricing the furniture. So when the Duke of Ashbourne began calling on our family, I did not let myself hope. Hope was a luxury I had trained myself out of. He was nothing like the rumours painted him. Cold, they said. Unfeeling, they said, after the scandal that took his first betrothed from him in a way no one ever spoke of directly. But when he looked at me, really looked, the first time we were introduced at Lady Pemberton's garden party, I felt something shift that I did not have a name for yet. Marigold noticed it too. She noticed everything that touched what she believed should belong to her. "He looked at you longer than he looked at me," she said that night, brushing out her hair with more force than necessary. "I suppose that's something, for once." I told myself it was nothing, a passing comment. Sisters said sharper things than that, and forgot them by morning. I was wrong. Over the following weeks, the Duke's attention toward me deepened in ways the whole county began to whisper about. He requested my company at dinners. He remembered small things I'd mentioned only once, the name of a book I loved, the colour I wore to my first season, the way I took my tea. Marigold's smile grew thinner each time his carriage arrived for me and not for her. Our mother warned me once, quietly, in the hallway outside my room. "Be careful, Ginevra. Your sister does not lose gracefully." I should have listened more closely to those words than I did. Because the truth was, I had also caught Marigold in a lie, only days before the Duke proposed. A small one, about where she had been on a Tuesday afternoon, when she claimed to be visiting our aunt. I never confronted her. I told myself it wasn't my business, that whatever she was hiding, it had nothing to do with me. I was wrong about that too. The proposal came on a Thursday evening, beneath the orangery lights at Ashbourne Hall. He did not kneel with grand speeches. He simply took my hand and said he had stopped pretending indifference toward anyone else the moment he met me. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Marigold was not there to see it. She had claimed a headache that night and stayed home. Looking back now, I understand that headache far better than I did then. Because 3 weeks later, at our official engagement ball, in front of every person whose opinion could make or unmake a family's reputation, my sister stood up from her seat, pointed her finger across the room, and tried to tear it all apart. And the Duke did not even blink. The silence after Marigold's accusation stretched so long, I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. She stood there in pale blue silk, her chin lifted, her finger still pointed at me like a blade she had been sharpening for weeks. Every guest in that ballroom had gone still, wine glasses suspended halfway to lips, fans frozen mid-air. I felt my face burn, not from shame, but from the sheer disbelief that my own sister would choose this moment, this room, this night, to do what she was doing. "She has been hiding something from you, Your Grace," Marigold said, her voice carrying across the marble floor. "Ask her about the gardener's son. Ask her what she did before you ever met her." I heard gasps ripple through the crowd like wind through dry grass. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face drained of colour so quickly I feared he might fall. I knew exactly what she was referring to. A friendship from years ago, innocent and long buried, twisted now into something ugly by the way she chose her words. There had been nothing improper in it, nothing that deserved to be spoken of in a ballroom full of strangers. But the truth rarely matters once it has been wrapped in scandal and handed to an audience hungry for it. I opened my mouth to defend myself, though I did not yet know what words would come out. The Duke spoke first. "Lady Marigold," he said, his voice low but carrying, the way thunder carries before the storm arrives. "I have known for some time who your sister was before she met me. I have also come to know, rather recently, who you are." The room seemed to tilt. I turned to look at him, searching his face for some explanation, some sign of what he meant, but his eyes never left my sister. "I had the pleasure," he continued, "of receiving a rather detailed account from my solicitor only this morning, about a certain arrangement you made with a moneylender in Cheapside. About a debt you assured him would be settled the moment your sister became a duchess, and you became, conveniently, family to me." Marigold's face went the colour of ash. I felt the floor shift beneath me, though I had not moved an inch. The headache she'd claimed the night of my proposal, the lie about visiting our aunt, pieces I had refused to examine too closely, now arranged themselves into a shape I did not want to see. "That is not," Marigold started, her voice cracking for the first time, "that is not what this is about." "Is it not?" the Duke asked. "Because from where I stand, it appears very much to be exactly what this is about." I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt relief crash over me, like a wave finally breaking after holding its shape too long. Instead, I felt something closer to grief. For the sister I thought I knew. For whatever desperation had driven her to this, debts I never knew existed, a fear she never trusted me enough to share. "Marigold," I said quietly, taking a step toward her despite everything, "why didn't you come to me?" Her eyes met mine, and for one fragile second I saw the girl I grew up with, not the woman standing in front of 300 witnesses trying to burn my future to the ground. Then the moment passed, and her expression hardened back into something I did not recognize. "Because you would have taken his pity and called it kindness," she said. "You always do." The words landed harder than I expected, not because they were true, but because some small, hidden part of me feared they might be. The Duke stepped closer to me then, placing his hand gently over mine. "None of this changes anything," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "My offer stands. My respect for Ginevra has not wavered for a single moment tonight, and it will not waver tomorrow." A murmur of approval moved through the crowd, the kind of sound that meant the scandal would soon turn into gossip about my sister instead of about me. I should have felt grateful. I did, somewhere beneath the noise in my chest. But as Marigold was led from the ballroom by our humiliated father, she turned back once and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not even jealousy. Fear. And it was that fear, more than anything she had shouted across that ballroom, that told me this was not over. Whatever debt she owed, whatever man she had promised to repay with my engagement, he was not the kind of man who accepted broken promises quietly. I did not know his name yet. I would learn it soon enough, and by then it would already be too late to protect the people I loved from what he intended to do next. For 3 days after the ball, no one in our house spoke above a whisper. My father retreated to his study and did not emerge except for meals he barely touched. My mother moved through the halls like a ghost, her eyes red-rimmed but dry, as if she had cried every tear she owned and had none left to spare. And Marigold, my sister, the girl who once filled every room with noise and certainty, stayed locked behind her bedroom door, refusing even the maids who brought her trays of food that returned to the kitchen untouched. I knew I should have felt vindicated. The Duke had defended me in front of everyone who mattered, and the gossip, as cruel as it was, had turned its hunger toward Marigold instead of me. But vindication felt hollow when I lay awake each night, replaying the fear I had seen on my sister's face as she was led from the ballroom. On the 4th morning, I decided I could not simply wait for someone else to explain what had happened to her. I found her sitting by her window, still in her dressing gown, staring at nothing in particular. She did not turn when I entered. "I'm not here to scold you," I said, closing the door gently behind me. "I want to understand." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her shoulders began to shake, and the sister I remembered from childhood, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, finally broke through the hardened mask she had been wearing for weeks. "His name is Mr. Holloway," she whispered. "I met him at the card tables last winter, when father's allowance stopped covering even my smallest expenses. I told myself it was harmless. Just a few hands of cards. Just enough to feel like I still had something of my own. She told me everything then. How the debt had grown faster than she could control it, how Mr. Holloway had seemed patient at first, almost kind, until the night he revealed exactly how he intended to collect what she owed him. He did not want her money. He wanted influence, a connection to a duke's household, secrets he could use in ways she still did not fully understand. He told me if I could not deliver what he wanted through marriage of my own, she said, I would need to disrupt yours instead. He said a scandal would be just as useful to him as a wedding. I felt sick listening to her, not only from fear of what this man might still attempt, but from the realization of how alone she must have felt, carrying this weight in silence rather than risking my judgment. "You should have told me," I said, though I tried to keep accusation from my voice. "And said what? That I gambled away what little dignity this family had left? That I let a man like that believe he could use me as a weapon against my own sister?" She shook her head. "I was ashamed, Ginevra. I still am." I sat beside her and took her hand, the way I had not done since we were children sharing secrets beneath blankets. Shame will not protect either of us now, but the truth might. That afternoon, I requested a private audience with the Duke. He received me in his study, a room lined with books I suspected he had actually read, unlike most men of his station who collected them purely for appearances. When I told him everything Marigold had confessed, his expression shifted from calm attentiveness to something colder, more deliberate. "Holloway," he said, almost to himself. "I have heard that name before, in circles far less respectable than this one. You know him?" I know enough to understand he does not make idle threats. He studied me carefully, as though weighing how much honesty I could bear. Men like Holloway do not simply disappear when their plans fail once. They adjust. They find new angles. A chill moved through me. "What do you suggest we do?" "We do nothing rash," he said. "We learn what he wants, precisely, and we ensure he never gets close enough to use your sister, or you, as a tool again." I admired, in that moment, how steady he remained, even as the danger around us grew sharper. But I also realized something about myself I had never fully acknowledged before. I was tired of being the one who simply endured circumstances built by other people's choices. I wanted, for the first time, to be someone who acted rather than someone who merely survived the actions of others. "I want to help," I told him. "Not as someone waiting in a drawing room for news. I want to understand exactly what we are facing. He studied me for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. Very well, he said. But understand, Ginevra, once you step into this, there will be no stepping back out. Holloway will not see you as an innocent bystander any longer. He will see you as an obstacle. I thought of Marigold's trembling hands, of the fear that had hollowed out her confidence these past months, and I thought of my own quiet years spent disappearing into corners while others made decisions for me. I would rather be an obstacle, I said, than remain someone easily moved aside. Something shifted in his expression then, admiration perhaps, or recognition of a strength he had not fully seen in me before. He rose from his desk and crossed the room, stopping close enough that I could see the seriousness etched into every line of his face. Then we begin tonight, he said, because I suspect Holloway already knows his plan at the ball failed, and men like him rarely wait long before attempting something far more dangerous. Outside, the afternoon light had begun to fade into the kind of grey that often preceded a storm, and somewhere beyond the walls of that quiet study, I understood our true conflict had only just begun. 3 nights later, a note arrived for the Duke, unsigned, instructing him to come alone to the old boathouse near the river if he wished to keep his betrothed's reputation and her sister's safety intact. I was not supposed to know about it. He had tried to keep it from me, some misguided attempt to protect me from danger he believed was his alone to face. But I found the note discarded near the hearth before the maid could burn it, and I understood immediately what it meant. I followed him into the night without telling a soul, my heart hammering louder than my footsteps against the gravel path leading toward the water. The boathouse stood half collapsed at the river's edge, lantern light flickering weakly through its broken windows. I arrived just as the Duke stepped inside, and I crept close enough to hear voices rising sharp and tense from within. "You should not have come," Holloway said, his voice smoother than I expected, almost amused, though I suppose dukes rarely listen to warnings meant to protect them. "I came because threatening my family ends tonight," the Duke answered, steady despite the danger humming in the air. "Your family," Holloway repeated, laughing softly. How touching. "Tell me, does Lady Ginevra know how easily her sister sold her out? Does she know how easily people break when desperate enough?" I stepped through the doorway before I could stop myself. Both men turned, equally startled by my presence. The Duke's face shifted instantly, from shock to fear, not for himself, but for me. "Ginevra, you should not be here." "Neither should you," I said, my voice trembling but holding firm. "Not alone." Holloway studied me with cold curiosity, the kind of look a man gives something he believes he can still control. Perhaps this works in my favour after all. 2 for the price of 1. My pulse roared in my ears, fear pressing against every rational thought I tried to hold on to. I had wanted to be someone who acted rather than waited, but standing there, faced with the very real possibility of losing everything, I felt that resolve waver dangerously. "What do you actually want?" I asked, forcing steadiness into my voice that I did not entirely feel. "Money will not satisfy you forever. Influence will not protect you from a duke's reach. So tell me plainly, what will make you disappear from our lives for good?" Something flickered behind his eyes, surprise perhaps that I had dared to negotiate rather than beg. "Clever," he said slowly, "but cleverness will not save you tonight." He moved toward the Duke with sudden speed, a glint of metal catching lantern light, and I understood with terrifying clarity that whatever happened in the next few seconds would determine far more than my engagement. It would determine whether either of us walked out of that boathouse at all. "Wait," I said, stepping directly between them, my heart screaming against the recklessness of my own body. "If you hurt him, you lose every advantage you think you have. Hurt me instead, and see how quickly the entire ton turns against the man who harmed a duke's betrothed." Holloway froze, calculating, and in that breathless pause, I realized I had just gambled everything, my safety, my future, perhaps even my life, on the hope that fear of consequence might outweigh his anger. The lantern flickered once, then steadied, as we all waited to see whose calculation would prove correct. For one terrible moment, Holloway said nothing at all, and the silence pressed against my chest like a hand closing around my throat. Then, slowly, he lowered the blade. "You truly are not what I expected, Lady Ginevra," he said, something almost like respect flickering beneath the coldness in his voice. "Most women in your position would have wept and begged. You bargained instead." "Because I understand men like you," I said, surprising myself with how steady the words came out. "You do not want chaos. You want leverage. And leverage requires me alive, not broken." Behind me, I felt the Duke shift slightly, his hand brushing mine in silent reassurance, though I could feel the tension radiating from him, ready to act the instant Holloway gave him reason to. But Holloway only studied us both for a long moment, weighing options I could not fully see behind his eyes. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, low and humorless. "Ashbourne, you should know your bride has more nerve than half the men I have done business with." He stepped back, slipping the blade from sight as though it had never been drawn at all. "I will leave your family alone, not out of mercy, out of practicality. A scandal involving violence against a duke's household would bring far more attention to my affairs than I care to manage." He turned toward the door, pausing only once to look back at Marigold's absence in the room, as if remembering she had been the reason this entire confrontation began. "Tell your sister," he said quietly, "that her debt dies with this conversation. I have no further use for a pawn who refuses to be moved." And then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the boathouse, leaving only the sound of the river and our own ragged breathing behind him. I do not remember exactly how long we stood there afterward, simply breathing, simply alive. The Duke turned to me first, his hands trembling slightly as he cupped my face, searching my eyes as though needing proof that I had truly walked through that danger and emerged unharmed. "You should not have followed me," he said, though there was no real anger in his voice, only fear finally allowed to surface now that the danger had passed. "And you should not have tried to face him alone," I answered. "We are meant to carry this together now, both the good and the terrible." He pressed his forehead gently against mine, and for the first time since the engagement ball, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief exactly, but a quiet certainty that whatever storms came next, I would not face them as the quiet girl who once disappeared into corners. The weeks that followed brought their own quieter resolutions. Marigold, once she learned what had happened at the boathouse, wept harder than I had ever seen her weep, grief and shame tangled together in equal measure. She begged forgiveness, not only from me, but from our parents, and slowly, carefully, we began rebuilding what her desperation had nearly destroyed. She was not absolved entirely, nor did she expect to be, but she earned, day by day, the chance to become someone steadier than the woman who once stood in a ballroom and pointed an accusing finger at her own sister. Our father, humbled by everything that had unfolded, finally allowed honesty into our household regarding the family's finances, a relief that lifted years of quiet suffocation from all of us. My mother, for her part, simply held both her daughters closer than she had in years, as though understanding instinctively that we needed each other now more than pride or old resentments. As for the Duke and me, our wedding took place beneath clearer skies than I ever could have imagined possible, surrounded by people who once doubted me and now greeted me with genuine warmth. I walked down that aisle, not as the overlooked sister, not as the quiet shadow trailing behind someone louder, but as a woman who had faced real danger and chosen courage over fear when it mattered most. Standing before him, exchanging vows that finally felt like promises rather than mere formalities, I understood something I had spent my whole life failing to recognize. Strength was never about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about choosing, again and again, to stand firm exactly when the world expected you to break. And as the Duke slid the ring onto my finger, smiling at me with the same calm certainty he had shown that very first night at the ball, I realized my sister's plan to ruin my engagement had, against every expectation, given me something far greater than the life I once quietly accepted. It had given me the version of myself I never knew I had the courage to become. 2 years passed before the letter arrived from a solicitor in London, informing us that Mr. Holloway had been arrested in connection with an entirely different scheme, one involving a young heiress in Bath who had not been fortunate enough to have a duke standing beside her when the danger came calling. I remember sitting with that news for a long while, feeling no triumph in it, only a quiet, heavy sorrow for the woman whose story had not ended the way mine had. I wrote to her anonymously, offering what little guidance I could, and though we never met in person, I like to believe some part of what I had survived helped her survive her own version of the same nightmare. By then, Marigold had become someone I barely recognized from the woman who once stood in that ballroom, finger raised, voice trembling with desperation disguised as accusation. She had taken to volunteering at a charity for women trapped in debts, not unlike the one that nearly destroyed her, women with nowhere else to turn and no one willing to listen. She told me once, late at night, over tea, that she finally understood the difference between being loved and being indulged, and that our parents, in trying to protect her from disappointment her whole life, had nearly cost her everything that mattered. "I used to think you were dull," she admitted, a small, sad laugh escaping her. "The quiet sister, who never wanted anything for herself. I understand now that quiet was never weakness. It was patience. I never had the patience for anything until I lost almost everything trying to avoid it." I held her hand and told her what I had come to believe myself, that we were never truly in competition, not really. Only two girls taught to fear. There was not enough love or attention or value to go around for both of us. It had taken nearly losing everything to understand how wrong that fear had been all along. My own life with the Duke, whose name I had grown so used to whispering in private that I sometimes forgot the rest of the world still called him Your Grace, settled into something steadier than I ever imagined possible for myself as a girl who once disappeared into corners. We argued sometimes the way any two strong-willed people inevitably do, but it was an honest kind of conflict, the sort that resolved itself through conversation rather than silence and resentment. He taught me to ride properly, laughing each time I nearly toppled from the saddle in my early attempts, and I taught him patience he claimed he never knew he possessed, especially during the long nights. Our first child kept us both awake with her insistent, healthy cries. We named her after no one in particular, choosing instead a name that belonged entirely to her, the way I had once wished my own name carried weight beyond simply being the quiet daughter, the overlooked sister, the woman almost ruined by a jealousy she never asked to inspire. It was on her first birthday, surrounded by family who had weathered storms none of us could have predicted that night at the engagement ball, that I finally understood the full shape of everything we had survived together. Marigold held her niece with a tenderness that still occasionally surprised me. Our parents watched with the quiet relief of people who finally trusted happiness not to be temporary, and the Duke caught my eye across the room with the same steady warmth he had shown me from the very beginning, long before either of us understood how deeply tested that warmth would become. I thought, in that moment, of the girl I used to be, the one who believed her only value lay in being unremarkable enough not to threaten anyone else's shine. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her that her quiet observance, her patience, her refusal to fight loudly for attention would one day become the very strength that saved everyone she loved. I could not reach her, of course, but I could become the proof she needed. Looking back now, I realize my sister never truly came to that ballroom to ruin my engagement at all. She came because she was drowning, and the only way she knew how to ask for help was by trying to pull someone else down with her. It took nearly losing everything for either of us to learn a better way forward, and I am grateful, even now, that the lesson came through survival rather than tragedy. If there is one truth I carry forward from everything that happened, it is this: the people who try hardest to tear us down are often the ones most desperate to be saved themselves. And sometimes, the love we think has been stolen from us was never truly lost at all, only waiting for honesty to clear the path back to it. So if this story moved you even a little, if you found yourself holding your breath through Geneva's journey the way I hope you did, please consider subscribing to this channel. There are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told, stories of quiet strength rising against impossible odds, and I would love nothing more than to share them with you. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Tell me in the comments, what part of Geneva's journey stayed with you the longest? And would you like to see what happens next in Marigold's story, now that she has found her own path forward? Until then, take care of each other, the way Ginevra finally learned to take care of herself.